In a moment, we'll speak to Dr. Mike Jones, political scientist and migration expert. But first, Henry Smith, former Conservative MP. Henry, always good to have you on. Afternoon to you, sir.
Good afternoon, Ian. How are you?
Very good, thanks. No, of course, we welcome a drop in figures in this respect. I mean, it was nothing really to do with the genius efforts of the current Home Secretary or Prime Minister. And as I was just saying, I'd like to think they would acknowledge that. No chance, I think, is the short answer. But nonetheless, it is a downward move. It is significant. The question is, will this continue?
Well, I think that is the question, and you're absolutely right that this, I think, unfortunately, temporary drop in net migration is down to what the then Conservative Home Office introduced in January 2024 in terms of restricting the amount of family visas for people coming here as students and other sorts of workers. But what we have seen, and of course the figures only go up until December last year, so for 7 months of the year it wasn't under this Labour government. But what we have seen in the last sort of 10 months of the Starmer administration is, of course, illegal migration significantly going up. And we've also seen a lot of Brits leaving the United Kingdom because of the increases in taxation. So I suspect these figures, with how weak this government is on migration, will start to creep up again as we get the figures in a year's time for 2025. And of course, small boat arrivals have significantly increased on this time last year. So I hope I'm wrong on all of that, but I suspect not.
I mean, it's interesting. We the headline is obviously about net migration, but if we had to look at this purely on the basis of the number of people that come to the UK, that figure is still nearly 1 million people. Now, I know there's a lot of students in there. That's a multi-billion-pound industry. We understand that. There is some abuse of that system, as we know. Some of these people will be neuroscientists and brain surgeons. Fantastic. Give that the rubber stamp. But it's still a lot of people to arrive in a year, 1 million.
It's an awful lot of people to arrive. And in terms of the net migration figures, 500,000 people, that is still a city every year the size of Edinburgh. You know, the United Kingdom is one of the most densely populated countries, certainly in Europe, and one of the most densely populated anywhere in the world. We're told that our public finances, there's a huge black hole, and that's why pensioners can't have their winter fuel allowance, and that's why there have to be changes to our welfare system, and why Rachel Reeves and Angela Rayner are talking about raising taxes. We're told all of that, and yet sort of this sort of laissez-faire, relaxed attitude to huge numbers of people arriving in this country. When our housing, Angela Rayner talking about 1.5 million new homes needed, that is taken up by a year and a half of migration on those figures. So it is something that I think we saw a backlash about in the local elections 3 weeks ago today. And if this government doesn't take it seriously, Starmer says, I get it. I don't think he does. I think that's expediency. If we don't get a grip of this, then it will have serious consequences. We certainly can't afford 4 more years of it.
No. And what we keep hearing, of course, Henry, as you know better than me, is that we need these people because they're doing jobs that Brits are either incapable of doing or don't want to do. What do you ascertain is the truth within that statement?
Well, there will be an element of that. There are some jobs that, indigenous British people, if I can put it like that, wouldn't want to do. But we do have rising unemployment, and it's important that people have the opportunity to be reskilled to do those jobs, that those jobs are attractive for native-born British people to carry out. And as long as we allow cheap labour in, it just undermines actually the ability of certainly people at the more sort of lower end of the working population. It prices them out because people can import cheap labour. And we're likely to see that if the new so-called reset with the EU goes ahead in terms of a youth mobility scheme. Even larger unemployment over on the continent of Europe than here. Again, it'll be sort of young working class people, British people, who will suffer as a result of less housing, more crowded schools, less jobs available, more crowded GP surgeries, so on and so forth.
Henry, as ever, thank you for your time, sir. Really appreciate that. Henry Smith, former Conservative MP, regularly speaks with us on these kind of issues. Let's get a word from somebody else who we speak to on a regular basis on this subject. Dr. Mike Jones, political scientist and migration expert. Afternoon to you, Mike. I mean, the figures are, you know, clearly it's a big headline. The figures have halved, scream the newspapers today. Is it a point of celebration, though? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. To some extent, yes. I mean, the numbers are down by nearly 50%. They're now 430,000, net migration, the difference between the people arriving and those leaving, it's not gross migration. Yeah, but it was entirely predictable. I said before the figures were released that I expected net migration to be less than 500,000, and it's 430,000. And as you say, this is due to the last-ditch reforms put in place by James Cleverly, the former Tory Home Secretary. He raised the salary thresholds for legal migrants, and he obviously banned dependents for care workers and most postgraduate students. So it was very predictable. The Labour Party should obviously not take credit for this, but we've got to bear in mind that the current numbers are much higher than pre-Brexit levels. I mean, pre-Brexit, it veered between 200,000 to 250,000. So there's a lot of work to be done.
Yeah, and again, to the point that I was just making to Henry there, one of the central arguments is, well, we're not just bringing in people willy-nilly. This is legal migration. Of course, we bring in people on a case-by-case basis, as it were, clearly because we need them. I mean, is that an irredeemable reality?
I wouldn't describe it as an irredeemable reality. I mean, ultimately, you can't use immigrants to fill vacancies. Why? Because immigrants don't just produce goods and services, they consume them as well.
Yeah.
So they don't just occupy jobs, they create jobs, if you like, in the process, because they need, food and clothing and amenities. Tony Blair imported well over 500,000 people to fill 500,000 vacancies. But, guess what? Allegedly, we've got close to 1 million vacancies today. So, that is not a correct policy, and it's not consistent with how economies work.
We are getting to that interesting stage now, it seems, where the channel migration, what is called the illegal immigration, numbers are rising there. It was always said by, those who don't seem particularly bothered about it, that, it's just a small amount in the grander scale. But as that legal migration figure drops, it brings into focus the reality of just how bad things are on the channel. We're not going to be far away from it being a quarter of the legal migration, if that makes sense.
That's a very good point. I mean, the distinction between legal and illegal migration is actually quite fuzzy. Very few people say this, but a lot of those who apply for asylum are illegal immigrants, and there are people who apply for asylum who are here legally on visa routes. So you've got a lot of students, for example, who will apply for asylum during their degree or after they finish their degree. So the distinction between them is very fuzzy. And the illegal migration crisis is going to spiral out of control. Well, it's already out of control, let's be honest, Ian. And the reason it's out of control is because we have the Human Rights Act, which embeds the ECHR, the European Convention of Human Rights, into British law. And that prevents people from being detained and deported because of Articles 3 and Articles 8. And Keir Starmer is fundamentally not going to change this. It's completely against his philosophy, his personality, and
100%.
his life story. So this is going to get much worse, in my opinion.
I sense it will, and I sense we have many more conversations to have on this, Mike. Great to have you on again. Thank you. He is Dr. Mike Jones, political scientist and migration expert. I think that last point is just a basic reality. We're all on top of that one, aren't we? That he's tinkering around the edges to get some headlines and to make it look like he's a bit in control.